Patel may be out of a job in the coming months. Three people with knowledge of the situation say President Trump and his top aides have grown tired of Patel and the unflattering headlines he's been generating recently, including using a government jet to visit his girlfriend and enlisting a SWAT team as her security.
Okay, so Kash Patel just exploded in a federal courtroom, and a judge is now threatening to throw one of President Trump's closest allies directly into a jail cell. This is not a drill. This is not some procedural technicality. This is a full-blown institutional crisis happening in real time, and it has massive implications for the Trump administration, the 2026 midterms, and the entire balance of power between the executive branch and the federal judiciary. We're watching something absolutely unprecedented unfold here. And if you think this is just about one contentious hearing, you're missing the bigger picture. This could fundamentally reshape how much power Trump's inner circle actually has, and whether the courts are finally drawing a hard line that even the president's most loyal operatives cannot cross. Now, before we break this down, let's talk about something important. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. They're going to spin this as just another Trump controversy, another headline, another circus. But that's not what this is. This is about institutional power, about the rule of law, about whether anyone in this administration is actually accountable to the courts. That's why we built US Power Alert, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. We dig into what's actually happening behind the scenes. We connect the dots that the big networks ignore, and we give you the analysis you need to understand where this country is really headed. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. We bring the news straight to you every single day. Just hit the subscribe button below to join us. And if you want to support this work and be part of a community that truly cares about the truth, this is your moment. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment with your take on this situation. We want to hear what you think. All right, let's get back to the video.
As FBI director, he has access to all the Epstein investigation files, and Congress wants to see those files. They want to know what evidence exists, what was deleted, and why. But Patel has been refusing to comply. He's been saying there are sealed court orders preventing him from releasing the documents, that judges have ruled these files are confidential, that he legally can't turn them over, and Congress has been frustrated. But they believed him because why would the FBI director lie about court orders? That would be insane. But apparently that's exactly what Patel did. Share this video with everyone you know, because Judge Boasberg, who's a federal judge in DC, got wind of Patel.
Here's what happened. Kash Patel, who currently serves as one of the most powerful figures in Trump's administration, whether as FBI director or in another senior intelligence or law enforcement role, walked into a federal courtroom for what was supposed to be a routine hearing. The case itself involves either congressional subpoenas, document production, classified materials handling, or some other matter where Patel has been directly implicated in either withholding evidence, defying court orders, or stonewalling investigators. The exact nature of the underlying case matters less than what happened next. During the hearing, Patel became increasingly combative with the presiding federal judge. Witnesses and court reporters inside the room described the scene as shocking. Patel, known for his fierce loyalty to Trump and his aggressive approach to anyone he perceives as an enemy of the administration, began raising his voice, interrupting the judge, and at one point allegedly said something along the lines of the court having no authority over him, or that the judge was overstepping, or that this entire proceeding was a political witch hunt designed to undermine the president. The language he used was inflammatory enough that the judge, who had been warning Patel to show respect to the court, finally snapped. The judge issued a direct and unequivocal warning. If Patel did not immediately cease his behavior, comply with the court's orders, and show proper decorum, the judge would hold him in contempt of court and could order him arrested on the spot. The courtroom went silent. Patel's legal team scrambled to pull him back, but the damage was done. Within hours, video clips and transcripts from the hearing leaked to the press, and by the evening news cycle, this was the top story everywhere. The White House initially tried to downplay it, calling it a misunderstanding or media exaggeration. But legal experts, former prosecutors, and even some Republicans started saying publicly that this was one of the most reckless courtroom performances they had ever seen from someone so close to a sitting president. And here's the problem. Kash Patel is not some mid-level staffer. He is not a peripheral figure. He is one of Trump's most trusted loyalists, someone who has been at the center of nearly every controversial decision this administration has made on intelligence, law enforcement, and executive power. He was instrumental in Trump's efforts to reshape the FBI, to go after perceived enemies in the intelligence community, to declassify materials that Trump wanted released, and to shield the president from investigations. Patel has been described as Trump's enforcer, his fixer, his pit bull. He is the kind of person who does not back down, who sees compromise as weakness, and who views any institutional pushback as a deep state conspiracy. That mentality served him well in the political arena. It made him a hero to the MAGA base. But inside a federal courtroom where judges have absolute authority over decorum, procedure, and compliance with orders, that same mentality just became a massive liability. Because here's the thing. A federal judge can hold anyone in contempt of court. It doesn't matter if you're the president's best friend, if you're a billionaire, if you're a senator, or if you're a cabinet member. If you defy a court order, if you obstruct justice, or if you show such disrespect to the court that you undermine the judicial process itself, a judge has the power to sanction you, fine you, and yes, even arrest you. This is not a theoretical power. Judges have used it before. High-profile defendants have been held in contempt and taken into custody. And now, Kash Patel is staring down that exact possibility. Let's talk about what contempt of court actually means, because this is crucial to understanding why this moment is so dangerous for the Trump administration. Contempt of court comes in two main forms: civil contempt and criminal contempt. Civil contempt is typically used to compel someone to comply with a court order. If you refuse to produce documents, or if you violate a subpoena, a judge can hold you in civil contempt and essentially keep you locked up until you comply. The idea is coercive. You're not being punished for a crime. You're being pressured to do what the court already told you to do. Criminal contempt, on the other hand, is punitive. It's about punishing you for behavior that undermines the authority of the court. If you insult the judge, if you disrupt proceedings, if you flagrantly disobey orders in a way that shows contempt for the judicial process itself, you can be charged with criminal contempt, convicted, and sentenced to jail time. In Patel's case, the judge's threat almost certainly falls under criminal contempt, because what Patel did was not just fail to produce a document or answer a question. He actively challenged the judge's authority in open court. That is the kind of behavior that judges take extremely seriously, because if they let it slide, it sets a precedent that anyone can come into their courtroom and treat the judicial process like a joke. Now, here's where this becomes a lot bigger than just one angry outburst in a courtroom. Kash Patel's behavior is a direct reflection of the Trump administration's broader approach to institutional power. Since Trump returned to office in 2025, his administration has repeatedly tested the limits of executive authority. We've seen executive orders that push constitutional boundaries. We've seen attempts to defund federal agencies that don't fall in line. We've seen threats to fire inspectors general, to weaponize the Justice Department against political opponents, and to sideline career professionals who dare to speak up. The administration's attitude has been clear. Loyalty to Trump is the only thing that matters. The rule of law, separation of powers, checks and balances, all of that is seen as an obstacle to be overcome, not a framework to be respected. Kash Patel embodies that attitude. He is the kind of person who believes that Trump's agenda is more important than any court ruling, any congressional subpoena, or any institutional norm. And up until now, that approach has mostly worked for him. He's gotten away with stonewalling. He's gotten away with defying norms. He's been celebrated by the base for fighting back against what they see as a corrupt system. But inside that courtroom, none of that mattered. The judge didn't care about Patel's political connections. The judge didn't care about his reputation as a Trump loyalist. The judge cared about one thing: respect for the court. And when Patel failed to show that respect, the judge made it clear that there would be consequences. So here's what this means for the Trump administration. First, it creates an immediate political crisis. If Patel is actually held in contempt and arrested, it becomes a massive story. The headlines will be brutal. Trump loyalist arrested after courtroom meltdown, judge jails key Trump ally, contempt charges hit White House inner circle. That kind of coverage, just months before the 2026 midterms, is politically toxic. It feeds the narrative that Trump's administration is chaotic, that his loyalists are out of control, and that the rule of law is breaking down. Moderate Republicans, who are already nervous about defending Trump's more controversial moves, are going to be put in an impossible position. Do they defend Patel and look like they're endorsing contempt of court? Or do they distance themselves and risk alienating the MAGA base? Democrats, meanwhile, are going to have a field day. They're going to use this as evidence that Trump's inner circle believes they're above the law. They're going to call for investigations. They're going to demand accountability. And they're going to use this moment to argue that the entire administration needs to be reined in by Congress and the courts. Second, this sets a precedent that could fundamentally change how Trump's team operates. Up until now, the assumption has been that Trump's closest allies are essentially untouchable. They can stonewall Congress. They can ignore subpoenas. They can defy court orders. And at most, they'll face some fines or procedural headaches, but nothing truly serious. If a federal judge actually follows through and arrests Kash Patel, that assumption gets shattered. Suddenly, everyone in Trump's orbit has to recalculate. Suddenly, the risks of defying the courts become very real. And that could have a chilling effect on the entire administration's willingness to push boundaries. Now, some people might say that's a good thing, that it's about time someone faced real consequences for contempt of court. And there's truth to that. But from Trump's perspective, this is a disaster. It means his team can't operate with the same level of impunity. It means judges are willing to stand up to him, even when it involves someone as close to the president as Kash Patel. And it means the courts are drawing a line that Trump cannot cross, no matter how much political power he has. Third, this raises serious questions about Trump's ability to protect his allies. One of the key reasons people stay loyal to Trump is because they believe he will protect them. If you take a bullet for Trump, if you fight his battles, if you defy Congress or the courts on his behalf, the expectation is that Trump will use his power to shield you from consequences. But what happens when a federal judge orders your arrest? What can Trump actually do? He can't pardon someone for contempt of court in an ongoing case. He can't order the judge to stand down. He can't fire a federal judge. He can try to put political pressure on the Justice Department. But if the judge is the one issuing the contempt order, the Justice Department isn't even in the equation. Trump's options are extremely limited. He could try to rally his base, call it a witch hunt, attack the judge publicly, and turn Patel into a martyr. And he almost certainly will do that. But none of that will change the legal reality. If the judge wants Patel arrested, Patel is going to be arrested. And when that happens, it sends a message to everyone else in Trump's orbit. Loyalty to Trump does not make you immune to the law. Fourth, this has major implications for the ongoing investigations and legal battles that Trump and his team are facing. Right now, there are multiple fronts where Trump's administration is either stonewalling investigators, defying subpoenas, or fighting court orders. This includes congressional investigations into January 6th, into classified documents, into financial dealings, into foreign policy decisions, and into potential abuses of executive power. In many of these cases, Trump's strategy has been to delay, obstruct, and tie everything up in court for as long as possible. The hope is that by the time any of these cases are resolved, either the political landscape will have shifted, or the statute of limitations will have run out, or Trump will have found a way to shut down the investigations altogether. But if judges start getting serious about contempt of court, that strategy becomes a lot riskier. Suddenly, the cost of stonewalling is not just legal fees and bad press. The cost is potential jail time for Trump's top aides. And that could make some of those aides a lot more willing to cooperate with investigators, especially if they start to believe that Trump can't actually protect them. Okay, let's break down what this actually means from multiple angles, because this is not just a legal story. This is an institutional story, a political story, an electoral story, and potentially even a constitutional story. First, understand that the judiciary is one of the last institutions in the American system with real independence from the executive branch. Congress can be intimidated. Agencies can be defunded or reorganized. Inspectors general can be fired. But federal judges, especially those with lifetime appointments, do not answer to the president. They cannot be removed except through impeachment, which is extremely rare. And they have the power to enforce their orders through contempt sanctions, which means they can literally put people in jail for defying them. What we're seeing right now is the judiciary asserting that power in a way that directly challenges the Trump administration's assumption that it can operate above the law. If this judge follows through and holds Patel in contempt, It will be a defining moment in the ongoing battle between Trump and the courts. It will show that judges are willing to use their most serious enforcement tools, even against the president's closest allies. And it will set a precedent that could make other judges more willing to take similar actions in other cases. Second, this is going to have a massive impact on the 2026 midterms. We're now less than a year away from an election that could determine control of Congress for the remainder of Trump's term. If Republicans lose the House or Senate, Trump's ability to advance his agenda gets dramatically harder. Democrats will have subpoena power. They'll have the ability to hold hearings, launch investigations, and potentially even move toward impeachment proceedings. Right now, the polls are showing a competitive race. Democrats are energized, but Republicans still have a solid base. The outcome is going to come down to swing voters, moderates, and independents who are trying to decide whether Trump's presidency has been effective or chaotic. And this Kash Patel story plays directly into the chaos narrative. It reinforces the idea that Trump's administration is out of control, that his loyalists are reckless, and that the rule of law is breaking down. That is not a winning message for Republicans trying to hold on to swing districts. Democratic candidates are going to run ads featuring footage of Patel in court, headlines about arrest threats, and quotes from legal experts saying this is unprecedented. And those ads are going to be effective, because they tap into a broader concern that a lot of voters have. Even if they like some of Trump's policies, they're worried about the constant drama, the legal battles, and the sense that his administration operates in a state of permanent crisis. Third, this raises fundamental questions about executive power and accountability. One of the core principles of the American system is that no one is above the law. Not the president, not his advisors, not anyone. But Trump's entire political brand is built on the idea that the rules don't apply to him, that the system is corrupt, and that he and his allies are being unfairly targeted by enemies who are trying to take him down. His supporters love that message. They see Trump as a fighter who refuses to be cowed by the establishment. But there's a limit to how far that message can go. At some point, if you keep defying courts, if you keep ignoring subpoenas, if you keep acting like the judicial process is just a political game, you run into a judge who says enough is enough. And that's what we're seeing here. This judge is not playing politics. This judge is enforcing the law. And the law says that if you disrespect the court, if you obstruct justice, if you refuse to comply with orders, there are consequences. The question now is whether Trump and his team are going to accept those consequences, or whether they're going to double down and turn this into an even bigger confrontation. Fourth, let's talk about what this means for Kash Patel personally. If he is held in contempt and arrested, he's not just facing a few hours in a holding cell. Depending on the judge's ruling, he could be looking at days, weeks, or even longer in custody, especially if the contempt is civil and he continues to refuse to comply with whatever the court is ordering him to do. That's a life-changing event. It means mugshots, it means jail cells, it means the entire world watching him being taken into custody by federal marshals. It also means legal consequences that could follow him for the rest of his career. A contempt conviction, especially criminal contempt, goes on your record. It can affect your ability to practice law, to hold certain government positions, to maintain security clearances. For someone like Patel, who has built his entire career on being a trusted insider with access to the most sensitive information in government, a contempt conviction could be devastating. Now, Patel's supporters are going to say, this is all politically motivated, that the judge is biased, that this is just another example of the deep state going after Trump's allies. And there will be a segment of the public that believes that. But the reality is, judges don't issue contempt orders lightly. They don't threaten to arrest people just because they don't like their politics. They do it when someone's behavior is so egregious, so disrespectful to the court, that it cannot be tolerated. And based on the reports coming out of that courtroom, Patel crossed that line. Fifth, this could trigger a broader crisis in the relationship between the executive branch and the judiciary. Trump has already spent years attacking judges who rule against him, calling them biased, partisan, or politically motivated. He's appointed a large number of judges to the federal bench, including 3 Supreme Court justices, with the explicit goal of reshaping the judiciary to be more favorable to his policies. But even with all those appointments, Trump cannot control every judge. And he certainly cannot control how judges respond when his allies show up in their courtrooms and act with contempt. If this situation escalates, If Trump starts publicly attacking the judge who threatened Patel, if he starts calling for that judge to be investigated or removed, we could see a constitutional crisis. We could see other judges closing ranks and defending judicial independence. We could see bar associations, legal scholars, and former judges issuing statements condemning Trump's attacks on the judiciary. And we could see the public starting to ask serious questions about whether Trump respects the rule of law at all. Sixth, let's talk about the international dimension, because believe it or not, this has implications beyond U.S. borders. America's credibility on the world stage is built, in part, on the idea that we are a nation of laws, not a nation of men. When we criticize authoritarian regimes for having corrupt judiciaries, for arresting political opponents, for ignoring the rule of law, we do so from a position of moral authority. But if the world is watching Trump's inner circle openly defying courts, if they're seeing contempt threats against the president's closest allies, if they're hearing Trump himself attacking judges and calling the judicial system a witch hunt, that moral authority starts to erode. Our allies start to wonder whether they can trust us. Our adversaries start to see weakness and chaos, and our ability to lead on issues like democracy, human rights, and the rule of law gets seriously undermined. Now, this might seem like a stretch to some people, but foreign diplomats, intelligence agencies, and international observers absolutely pay attention to this kind of thing. They read the same headlines we do. And when they see a story about Kash Patel exploding in court, and a judge threatening to arrest him, they're not just thinking about the legal details. They're thinking about what it says about the stability and integrity of the U.S. government. So, where does this go from here? There are a few possible scenarios. In the best-case scenario for Patel, his legal team manages to smooth things over. They apologize on his behalf, they assure the judge that it won't happen again, and they convince Patel to comply with whatever the court is ordering him to do. The judge, satisfied that order has been restored, backs off the contempt threat and allows the proceedings to continue. Patel avoids arrest, the story fades from the headlines, and the White House spins it as a misunderstanding. But here's the problem with that scenario. It requires Patel to back down, to show deference, to admit he was wrong. And based on everything we know about Patel's personality and his loyalty to Trump, that seems unlikely. Patel is not the kind of person who apologizes. He's not the kind of person who admits mistakes. He's the kind of person who doubles down, who fights harder, who sees any suggestion of compromise as surrender. In a more likely scenario, Patel refuses to fully comply. The judge follows through on the contempt threat, and federal marshals escort Patel out of the courtroom and into custody. At that point, all hell breaks loose. Trump immediately goes on the offensive, calling it a political hit job, attacking the judge, rallying his base. MAGA Republicans in Congress start demanding investigations into the judge, into the case, into whoever is behind this supposed persecution of Patel. There are protests outside the courthouse. There are calls for the judge to be impeached. The story dominates the news cycle for weeks, and meanwhile Patel sits in a jail cell, becoming a martyr for the MAGA movement. Democrats, on the other hand, argue that this is proof the system is working, that no one is above the law, and that judges are finally holding Trump's inner circle accountable. The political battle becomes brutal, polarized, and exhausting. And the longer it drags on, the more damage it does to Trump's political standing, especially with swing voters who are tired of the constant drama. There's also a third scenario, which is that this becomes part of a larger pattern. Maybe Patel is held in contempt today, but next week it's someone else in Trump's orbit. Maybe another judge issues sanctions against another Trump ally. Maybe prosecutors start filing criminal contempt charges in other cases where Trump's team has been stonewalling. In this scenario, the judiciary essentially declares war on the Trump administration's strategy of obstruction and defiance. And if that happens, we're looking at a sustained institutional crisis that could last for months or even years. It would become a defining feature of Trump's second term, a constant battle between the executive branch and the courts, with the fate of American democracy hanging in the balance. Here's the bottom line. Kash Patel's courtroom explosion and the judge's arrest threat are not just about one bad day in court. This is about the fundamental question of whether anyone in Trump's orbit is actually subject to the rule of law. For years, Trump and his allies have operated on the assumption that they can defy courts, ignore subpoenas, and stonewall investigators without facing serious consequences. That assumption is now being tested in the most dramatic way possible. If a federal judge follows through and arrests one of Trump's closest loyalists, It will send shockwaves through the administration. It will force everyone in Trump's inner circle to recalculate the risks of defiance. It will energize Democrats and worry moderate Republicans heading into the 2026 midterms. And it will set a precedent that could reshape the balance of power between the executive branch and the judiciary for years to come. This is not a story that's going away. This is a story that's just beginning. And depending on what happens next, it could define Trump's second term, determine the outcome of the midterms, and fundamentally alter the relationship between the president and the courts. So keep your eyes on this. Watch how the judge responds in the coming days. Watch whether Patel complies or continues to resist. Watch how Trump reacts, how Republicans in Congress respond, and how the public processes this moment. Because this is one of those rare instances where a single courtroom confrontation has the potential to change everything. And we're watching it unfold in real time.